When Tom uncovers his wife Angela's secret affair, his world unravels in an instant. Fueled by betrayal and anger, he sets out on a calculated path of revenge, exposing her lies and shattering her double life. But as Angela's perfect world crumbles under the weight of her deceit, Tom is unprepared for the depths of her despair. What begins as a story of betrayal and vengeance takes a devastating turn, revealing the fragile line between love, loss, and retribution. In the end, Tom is left to grapple with a heartbreaking question: was his revenge worth the ultimate cost? The morning was unremarkable. Angela buzzed around the kitchen, juggling a coffee cup, a half-packed suitcase, and her phone, which chirped endlessly with notifications. I sat at the counter, nursing my own coffee, pretending to read the paper. My wife of 10 years was always busy, important meetings, conferences, late-night calls. But over the past few months, something had shifted. The late nights felt later, the explanations thinner. And this morning, as I watched her carefully layer her makeup, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that her perfection was more performance than routine. "I'll be back Sunday evening," Angela said, flashing me her usual bright smile. "The conference is packed with sessions, but I'll try to call when I can." "Don't work too hard," I replied, feigning indifference. A practiced response. It had become my default, a way to avoid the growing distance between us. Yet, as I stood there, I felt that this time, her leaving was different. It wasn't just my imagination playing tricks on me. The moment she disappeared into the bathroom for a last-minute touch-up, her phone buzzed loudly on the counter. I glanced at it out of instinct. The name on the screen froze me in place. The message was short but damning: "Can't wait to see you tonight, gorgeous." My pulse quickened. I glanced at the bathroom door, hearing the sound of running water. I told myself to ignore it, to let it slide. But my hand betrayed me, reaching for the phone and tapping to reveal more of their exchange. A stream of flirtatious messages unfolded before me: plans for a romantic dinner, promises whispered through text. My heart sank, then hardened. Angela reappeared moments later, oblivious to my discovery. "All right," she said brightly, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "I'll see you Sunday." I forced a smile and kissed her cheek. "Have a good trip." As the door shut behind her, the silence of the house swallowed me whole. My mind raced. Years of marriage, trust, and shared dreams unraveled with each new thread of suspicion. My first instinct was to confront her immediately, but something held me back: a cold calculation, a need for proof. Angela was meticulous, and if I misstepped, she'd cover her tracks even better than before. I needed to be sure. I started with her phone bill. My hands shook as I scrolled through the online statements. Sure enough, a single number stood out, recurring at all hours: early mornings, late nights, weekends when she was supposedly working. My heart clenched as I clicked on the number, already knowing who it belonged to. Next, I turned to her credit card statements. Dinner charges at high-end restaurants, hotel stays in nearby towns, places Angela had no reason to visit. The pieces fell together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't deny. I hesitated at her email. It felt invasive, even in my anger. But then I remembered how her phone had betrayed her. My stomach churned as I typed her login information, an anniversary date, of all things, and found myself inside her inbox. It was a mix of work and personal correspondence, most of it mundane. But tucked away in the drafts folder, as if waiting to be sent, was a message that confirmed everything. "Daniel, I'm counting the hours until I see you. Being with you feels like freedom. I've never laughed so much or felt so alive." I read it twice, as if the words might change on a second pass. But they didn't. The betrayal was real, glaring and unrelenting. I closed her laptop, the cold anger from earlier now boiling over into rage. But I knew better than to act impulsively. Confronting her now would only give her the chance to twist the truth, to cover her tracks. "No," I needed to plan. By the time the kids returned from school, I had regained my composure. Emma and Jake, oblivious to the storm brewing, filled the house with their chatter. For their sake, I pushed the turmoil aside, focusing on dinner, homework, and bedtime stories. Angela's absence had always been a sore spot, but tonight, it felt like a gaping wound. When the house was quiet again, I sat in the living room, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed, a notification from the GPS tracker I'd secretly installed in Angela's car weeks ago. It pinged her location at a bed and breakfast an hour outside the city. Not a conference center, not a corporate hotel. A bed and breakfast. I clenched my jaw, bile rising in my throat. So this was her conference. This was where she found her freedom. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. But amid the anguish, a plan began to form, a way to expose the truth and take back control. By morning, I had a clear vision of what I needed to do. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, but the warmth did nothing to soften the icy resolve that had taken hold of me. Angela's lies had painted our marriage with a brush of betrayal, and now every memory of her felt tainted. The laughter, the late-night talks, the shared dreams, all of it seemed hollow, like a house of cards ready to collapse. And I was ready to knock it down. The first step was Daniel. I didn't know much about him yet, but I knew where he worked. It was all in Angela's emails, his name, his position, and even a few details about his office culture. He worked at a boutique law firm downtown, and from the way Angela described him, he was smug, self-assured, and completely oblivious to the wreckage he was causing. That was about to change. I spent the morning researching his firm, poring over client reviews and news articles. I found the managing partner's contact information easily enough, tucked away in the About Us section of their website. I typed out a carefully worded, anonymous email. Dear Mr. Carver, I am writing to inform you of an inappropriate relationship occurring between one of your employees, Daniel Sullivan, and a married client, Angela, last name. As a professional organization, I thought you would want to be aware of this situation, as it may reflect poorly on your firm. I have evidence of their ongoing affair, should you require it. The email was professional, measured, and damning. I hit send and sat back, my heart pounding. It wasn't enough to end their affair, I needed to scorch the earth they had built it on. The next step was confronting Angela, but not yet. I needed her to feel the weight of her actions, to watch her world crumble before she even realized what was happening. The GPS tracker I'd installed in her car continued to ping her location, still at the same bed and breakfast. They were likely enjoying a cozy brunch together, completely unaware that their secret was already unraveling. By midday, I was back at home, scrolling through my phone. Angela had posted a photo on her private Instagram account, a close-up of a mimosa glass, captioned, "A perfect morning after a productive night of networking." I laughed bitterly at the audacity. The lie was so blatant, it was almost insulting. I clicked through her profile, skimming the curated highlights of her life. Every post was a polished illusion, pictures of us smiling at family gatherings, snapshots of the kids playing in the yard, and, most recently, filtered shots of her solo adventures. It was all so meticulously staged, so completely disconnected from reality. My phone buzzed, another notification from the tracker. This time, the location had shifted slightly. Angela and Daniel were on the move. My fingers itched to follow them, to confront them in the act, but I held back. There was no need to rush. Their time would come, and it would be on my terms. By evening, I was back on my computer, drafting another email. This one was to Angela's boss at her marketing firm. I kept it short and to the point, attaching screenshots of her texts and emails with Daniel as evidence. Dear Ms. Whitman, I regret to inform you of an inappropriate relationship involving Angela, last name, and Daniel Sullivan, a lawyer she has been meeting under the guise of professional networking. As this situation involves the misuse of company time and resources, I thought it prudent to bring it to your attention. The email was sent before I could second-guess myself. Angela had built her life on deceit, and now it was time for the facade to crack. Her career had been a point of pride, a symbol of her independence. Watching it crumble would be a bitter but necessary part of the reckoning. As the day wore on, I began piecing together the final step of my plan, the confrontation. I wanted her to see the full weight of her betrayal, to feel the sting of everything she had destroyed. But it wasn't enough to simply accuse her. I needed her to confront the truth herself, to see the evidence laid bare. That evening, while the kids played in their rooms, I cleared the dining table and spread out the evidence. Printouts of her emails and texts. Screenshots of her Instagram posts. Photos of her car parked at the bed and breakfast. The GPS logs. I laid them all out methodically, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. By the time I was done, the table was a damning collage of her infidelity. The sight of it filled me with both satisfaction and dread. This wasn't how I had envisioned our marriage ending, but Angela had left me no choice. That night, as I tucked Emma and Jake into bed, a pang of guilt gnawed at me. They didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of their parents' implosion. I kissed them goodnight, promising myself that no matter what, I would shield them from the fallout. I returned to the living room and waited. Angela would be home in a matter of hours, oblivious to the storm waiting for her. My mind raced with possible scenarios, each one more confrontational than the last. But I reminded myself to stay calm. This wasn't about shouting or accusations. This was about justice, about making her face the reality she had so carefully avoided. When the clock struck midnight, the sound of Angela's car pulling into the driveway sent a jolt through me. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. It was time. She walked through the door, all smiles and feigned exhaustion. "Hey," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "What a weekend. I'm exhausted." I gestured to the dining table. "I bet you are. Why don't you take a look at this?" Angela froze, her eyes darting to the table. As she stepped closer, the color drained from her face. The weight of her lies, carefully laid out before her, was undeniable. "What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "This," I said evenly, "is the truth. And you're going to explain it to me." Angela's eyes widened as she scanned the table. The damning pile of evidence seemed to scream at her from every angle: the printed emails, the GPS logs, the photos of her car at the bed and breakfast. Her confident, polished demeanor cracked under the weight of the betrayal staring back at her. I don't know what this is," she stuttered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing, Tom?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorway, blocking her exit. "I think you know exactly what this is. The question is, are you going to keep lying to my face, or are you finally going to tell me the truth?" She hesitated, her gaze darting between me and the evidence. "You've got it all wrong," she began, her tone shifting to one of forced calm. "These emails, they're taken out of context. Daniel is just a colleague. We've been collaborating on some projects, and—" "Stop," I interrupted sharply. My voice was quiet but firm, cutting through her excuses. "Don't insult me, Angela. I'm not stupid. I know about the bed and breakfast. I know about the dinners, the texts, the lies. So spare me whatever story you've cooked up and just admit it." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But then, as if a switch flipped, her expression hardened. "You've been spying on me," she snapped, her voice rising. "Invading my privacy. Reading my emails. Tracking my car. Do you realize how insane that is? Don't you dare turn this around on me," I shot back, my voice tinged with fury. "You betrayed me. You lied to me, to our kids. And now, you want to make this about how I found out. Unbelievable." Angela's jaw tightened, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "It's not what you think," she insisted. This wasn't supposed to happen." "What wasn't supposed to happen?" I pressed, stepping closer. "The affair. The lies. The complete disregard for your family. Which part of this wasn't supposed to happen, Angela?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she finally sank into a chair at the table. Her shoulders slumped as the weight of the situation bore down on her. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. "It was just, I don't know, excitement. A distraction. I never meant to hurt you, Tom." The sincerity in her voice might have moved me once, but now it felt hollow, a desperate attempt to salvage the wreckage she'd created. "You didn't mean to hurt me?" I repeated, my tone icy. "Every text, every lie, every trip to see him, what did you think that was doing to us?" Angela wiped her eyes, her breath hitching. "I was lonely," she admitted. "You're always working, always distracted. I needed something more. I needed to feel alive." I stared at her, the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "So instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix what was broken, you decided to destroy it completely?" Her silence was answer enough. I let the room fall quiet, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on us both. Angela stared at the table, unable to meet my eyes. For a fleeting moment, I considered walking away, leaving her to sit with her guilt. But there was more to say, more she needed to hear. "You should know," I began slowly, "that I've already sent the evidence to Daniel's boss. By now, he's probably packing up his desk. And I've also sent it to your boss." Her head snapped up, panic flashing across her face. "You didn't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did," I confirmed. "You lied to me, Angela. You lied to your family, your colleagues. You've been living a double life, and now everyone's going to see it for what it is." Angela's composure broke completely. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing into the silence. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly smothered by the memory of her betrayal. "What happens now?" she choked out between sobs. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What happens now is up to you. I'm done pretending everything is fine. I'm done being your backup plan while you play house with someone else. The kids and I deserve better." Her tears came harder, her sobs echoing in the room. "Please, Tom," she begged, her voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't end us. I'll do anything to fix this." I shook my head, the resolve I'd built over the past days solidifying. "You don't get to decide that anymore, Angela. You made your choice when you stepped into his arms. And now, I'm making mine." I left her there, crumpled at the table, as I retreated to the bedroom. The weight of the confrontation clung to me, but beneath it all was a sense of finality. Angela's tears, her excuses, they couldn't erase the damage she'd done. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There would be lawyers, custody battles, and endless explanations to the kids. But as painful as it was, I knew it was the only path forward. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for our marriage, it was beyond saving, but for the chance to rebuild, to find peace in the rubble Angela had left behind. And that hope, however faint, was enough to carry me through. Angela's pleas echoed in my mind long after I closed the bedroom door. The weight of what had transpired between us was oppressive, but I reminded myself it was necessary. Betrayal doesn't end with apologies, it demands consequences. Still, as I sat in the quiet of our bedroom, I couldn't shake the ghost of what our marriage had been, or what I thought it had been. I fell into a restless sleep that night, haunted by fragmented dreams of Angela and Daniel. They laughed, entwined in a way that mocked the life we'd built. And there I was, watching from the sidelines, powerless and invisible. The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. Angela wasn't in bed when I woke up. At first, I felt relief, perhaps she'd left, unable to face the aftermath of her choices. But as I moved through the house, a gnawing sense of unease began to settle over me. Her car was still in the driveway. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, its screen dark. "Angela?" I called out, my voice betraying my nervousness. No response. I checked the kids' rooms, but they were still sound asleep, undisturbed by the tension that had filled the house the night before. My pulse quickened as I moved to the back door. It was slightly ajar, a gust of wind nudging it open and closed. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air. And then I saw her. Angela sat at the edge of the pool, her feet dangling in the water. She wore the robe she'd thrown on the night before, and her shoulders were hunched forward, as if she were trying to fold into herself. "Angela," I said softly, walking toward her. "What are you doing out here?" She didn't turn to look at me. Instead, her voice came, quiet and broken. "Do you remember the first time we brought the kids here? How happy we were. How we thought this house was going to be our forever home." I stopped a few feet away, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I remember." Angela let out a hollow laugh. "It's funny, isn't it? How everything you think is permanent can just fall apart." "Angela, let's go inside," I said, taking a step closer. "We can talk." "No," she interrupted sharply, finally turning to look at me. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen and red. "There's nothing left to talk about, Tom. I ruined it. I ruined everything." The rawness in her voice shook me, but I held my ground. "You can't undo what's done, Angela, but you can move forward. We both can." She shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "Move forward to what? You hate me. The kids will hate me when they find out. My career is over. Daniel, he won't even return my calls." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For all my anger, I hadn't anticipated the depths of her despair. But before I could respond, Angela stood up, her movements slow and deliberate. "Angela, don't," I said, panic rising in my chest. "Please, don't do anything." She took a step toward the pool's edge, her bare feet inches from the water. "You were always the strong one, Tom. You'll take care of them. You'll give them a better life than I ever could." "Stop!" I shouted, rushing toward her, but it was too late. Angela stepped forward, her body falling into the still, glassy surface of the pool. For a moment, she disappeared beneath the water, and then the ripples spread outward, distorting the reflection of the morning sky. I dove in without hesitation, the cold water shocking my system as I scrambled to find her. My hands reached out, grabbing her arm and pulling her to the surface. Her body was limp, her face pale as I dragged her to the pool's edge. "Angela, no," I choked out, hauling her out of the water. "Stay with me." I started CPR, my hands pressing against her chest, my breaths filling her lungs. Seconds felt like hours as I fought to bring her back, shouting her name between frantic attempts to resuscitate her. But her body remained still, unresponsive. The sound of sirens broke through my haze. I hadn't even realized I'd called 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Paramedics stormed the backyard, taking over where I had failed. I stood there, soaked and shivering, as they worked on her. The minutes dragged on, and with each passing second, the knot in my chest tightened. I watched, helpless, as they finally stopped, their faces grim. "I'm sorry," one of them said softly. "She's gone." The words didn't register at first. I stared at Angela's lifeless form, her wet hair clinging to her face, her robe soaked and heavy. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But it was. The next few days passed in a blur. The house was filled with the sound of condolences, the murmur of visitors offering their sympathies. The kids didn't understand, how could they? I told them it was an accident, a moment of confusion and sadness. But I knew the truth, and it haunted me. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I sat by the pool, staring at the water. It reflected the stars above, calm and unassuming, as if it hadn't witnessed the end of everything I thought I knew. Angela's betrayal had shattered me, but her loss left a wound so deep I couldn't see the bottom. For all the anger I'd felt, I hadn't wanted this. I hadn't wanted her gone. In the silence, I realized something that would haunt me forever. I had set this in motion. My need for vengeance, my refusal to soften my anger, it had driven her to the edge. And now, no amount of regret could bring her back. I closed my eyes, the weight of grief pressing down on me. The pool rippled gently in the breeze, its surface a mirror to the broken man staring into it.